The Irish defence of Limerick in 1690 was a remarkable achievement. It came as a rude shock to King William. It was a great restorative of morale for the Irish and a notable success, won by their own courage and energy. On July 3, Irish and French troops started to make their way to Limerick. It had become a rallying point for the armies as it was a place of considerable natural strength. King William did not reach Limerick for another 5 weeks. The delay was due to the French naval victory at Beachy Head, as panic had spread in London, and he was reluctant to move away from the east coast of Ireland. He thought the Irish were at his mercy, and from Finglas he had issued an uncompromising declaration calling on their leaders to surrender unconditionally. This stiffened the Irish to fight on for better terms, and King William's slowness to move to Limerick gave them hope of being able to do so effectively. Tyrconnell and the French thought further resistance useless, but General Sarsfield and a number of bolder spirits were in favour of holding out. Lawson, the French commander, refused to keep his regiments in Limerick as it was too far from the sea, and he did not want to mix up with the Irish army. He retreated to Galway with half his powder and 12 pieces of field artillery. The forces in Limerick consisted of 28 regiments, some 14,000 men. There was a cavalry force 2,500 strong in County Clare under Sarsfield, and up the west bank of the Shannon was a large force of men raised by Hugh O'Donnell, who had arrived from Spain a few weeks earlier. King William's army is put at over 25,000 men. In addition to English troops, it consisted of Dutch, Huguenots, Brandenburgers and a corps hired from the King of Denmark. The Irish had a man familiar with the master's methods, and who had actually rubbed shoulders with Vauban at Douai, Lille, Maastricht and elsewhere. This was Alexander Rainier, Marquis de Boisselot. He had participated in 9 major sieges and was familiar with the latest techniques in siege warfare. He now assumed responsibility for strengthening Limerick. Under his instructions, a ditch was constructed outside the Irish town wall, and redoubts were built and houses destroyed to prevent them being used for cover by the advancing enemy. A palisade which ran from the front of St. John's Gate to the East Watergate. Everything was done, however, in haste, and some were unsure of the adequacy of the result. Lauzun, the senior French commander, was unimpressed and declared, famously, that the walls of Limerick would collapse if pelted with roasted apples. William arrived on the 7th of August bringing only field artillery with him, clashing with pickets who had lined the hedgerows. His army drew up on the higher ground from Ireton's fort and onto an old Viking fort. The line was a crescent about half a mile from the Irish town wall. William then sent a summons to the commander to surrender, which received a brave reply from the Irish was, "Now or never, now and forever." This was followed by heavy cannon fire from the town's wall, which concentrated on King William's headquarters, several shots falling near his tent. William awaited the arrival of 8 heavy guns from Dublin with the accompanying procession of ammunition wagons. At midnight on the 9th of August, General Sarsfield and a company of horse slipped out of Limerick by the North Gate. They made for the main cavalry camp at Clare Castle on the Galway road and increased their numbers. These were augmented further by horse relieved from guarding the Shannon ford at Annabeg. Then, 500 strong, they followed the west bank of the Shannon, past Bridgetown, Ballycorney, and on to Killaloe, where he turned left and followed the river upstream to where he crossed at a ford into County Tipperary. Ahead of him went a quota of scouts to keep an eye out for enemy cavalry and to monitor the progress of the siege train. Sarsfield himself was guided by a man of noted reputation, the Rapparee Michael Galloping Hogan, from the parish of Doon, at the foot of the Slieve Feelings in East Limerick. Around midnight General Sarsfield approached the camp. No attack was expected and it was lightly guarded. As the horsemen stole up, a sentry was alerted by the undeadened hoofs and challenged, "Who goes there?" At this, Sarsfield sprang out, his horse rearing, and answered, "Sarsfield is the word, and Patrick Sarsfield is the man." In a flash the intruders overwhelmed the stupefied guards. Standing on their stirrups, they galloped through the camp, cutting down, right and left the half-awakened troopers. There was bedlam as the Jacobites wheeled their horses again and again. Dozens of Orange soldiers were killed and the rest ran like hares in all directions. General Sarsfield had been pleased with his raid. The siege train, being 2 miles long, contained 6 24-pounder cannon, 2 18-pounders, 8 brass ordnances of 18 inches, 3,000 cannon balls, 120 barrels of powder, 1,600 barrels of match, 500 hand grenades and numerous other munitions. In all there was 153 wagons, drawn by 500 draft horses, 19 tin and cork boats for a pontoon bridge. Sarsfield instructed that everything be burnt. The cannons were stuffed with powder and their long barrels stuck into the ground. All the carts, shells, powder, and other explosive material was heaped in a circle and a powder trail laid to the end of the meadow. One eyewitness account says that Galloping Hogan was given the honor of lighting the fuse. The powder track spluttered and the flame raced towards the huge mound of powder in the middle of the circle. Then the whole lot went sky high. The earth-shaking roar was reputed to be the loudest man-made sound ever heard in Ireland. The night sky went red and the glow could be seen in Limerick. The feat added greatly to the general's reputation and was an invaluable support to Irish morale and the policy of resistance. During the following days the Williamites made trenches between their positions and the Irish town wall, and set up a battery to fire at the wall. The Irish fired back and made an effective night attack on the soldiers who they caught asleep in their trenches. The heaviest fighting took place on the afternoon of the 20th when the Williamites attacked an Irish redoubt near the southeast corner of the wall. Boisleau describes the post as being an earthen redoubt. With a mixed force of infantry and cavalry the Irish charged the Danes and Brandenburgers so vigorously that they drove them back to their trenches in much disorder. According to a Danish officer there was much loss. With the arrival of heavy guns the Williamites pushed closer and closer to the Irish town wall. On the 24th the original positions of the batteries were found to be too long in range as to be ineffective, and that new positions were established within 80 paces of the wall. This involved moving the guns across low-lying ground. The morning of the 25th saw a change in the weather. Rain fell at a furious rate and filled the trenches with 2 feet of water. The weather cleared at around 3 in the afternoon and the gunners, piled with drink, fired 300 cannon balls at the wall, and this was supplemented with carcasses of red-hot shot which started a number of fires in the town. The defenders tried to protect the wall with woolsacks but to no avail. A considerable breach was made and the breach was widened by firing. The next day the Irish made a retrenchment behind it and mounted 3 cannons. On the morning of the 27th cannon fire was directed at Ball's Bridge, and at the breach. At 2:30 p.m. the order was given to attack the Countess Carp. The Duke of Wurtemberg protested to William that the breach should be enlarged, so that 16 men could fit abreast and the attack should be made with fresh men. But King William wanted the English to make the attack to prevent jealousy. The Grenadiers, about 500 men, went into the trenches to make the first attack, supported by 1 battalion of Dutch Blue, on the right 5 regiments of Danish, and the Brandenburgers. Douglas commanded. King William went with his high officers to the hill near St. Patrick's, where they had a full view of the action. Douglas had orders to possess the Countess Cape. At 3:30 p.m. the signal was given by firing 3 cannon. The Grenadiers leaped from their trenches, firing their guns and throwing grenades. The Irish fired great and small shot as fast as possible. Their fire was so heavy that few experienced officers had ever seen the alike, until the Grenadiers got to the Countess Cape, when they fled leaving their weapons behind, through the breach and up the ditch towards John's Gate, where they were eventually stopped by Irish dragoons stationed in the outworks of the citadel and made turn around and face the Williamites coming behind. Boisselou's regiment was ordered to John's Gate, but on their way were ordered to light their matches and head for the breach, where they found the Williamites already inside between the retrenchment and the breach, with about 20 over the retrenchment and into the streets. At first they thought they were their own men, but seeing the blue boughs in their caps, an officer was on the breach crying that the town was theirs. The 3 regiments reached the retrenchment line and were ordered not to fire until the compound was full, and when they did, supported by 3 cannon, 1 36-pounder and 2 24-pounders firing cartridge shot and iron chains. It was so rapid that the compound was soon cleared, but more kept coming in. Meantime the inhabitants of the Irish town fled over Ball's Bridge, and 1 regiment attempted to do so but were stopped by the guards, shutting the gate against them, marched back to the breach, but not before the initial heat was over. The Irish on the wall did not retreat under heavy fire from 18 cannons and muskets. 200 were killed or wounded there, and their positions filled by willing soldiers. The stage lasted about an hour with great slaughter of the Williamites. The supporting regiments, having no orders to proceed, stopped at the Countess Carp. This they clung to doggedly, but could make no further headway, for behind the breach a masked battery of 3 guns now opened upon them with cartridge shot, and prevented them from aiding the Grenadiers, who were soon slowly forced back through the breach. They had been roughly handled during their brief visit to Limerick. Some were shot, some taken, and the rest came out again, but very few without being wounded. The Irish, rallying, manned the breach anew, and for 3 hours a desperate struggle raged in that narrow way. Once more William's veterans fought their way into the streets, and the Irish called up their last reserves. From the side streets the citizens, seizing the readiest implements, rushed out to aid their hard-pressed soldiers. They turned the tide. Fighting stubbornly, the Williamites were driven back foot by foot, and hurled out through the breach. The king flung forward his reserves. In vain, plied with unceasing cannon shot and musketry, they could not cross the deadly zone. Missiles of every kind were rained upon them. MacMahon's regiment, having no weapons, cast down stones upon the assailants, and the very women, hurling stones and broken bottles, boldly stood in the breach and were nearer the Williamites than their own. For William had promised his soldiers a free town. While the fight was hottest, the Brandenburger swarmed up on the Black Battery, and a yellow glare shot through the dust clouds, and a louder crash rang above the general uproar, as a quantity of powder was fired beneath them with deadly effect, killing over 30 and wounding much more. Irish dragoons sallied out through St. John's Gate and took the stormers in flank, and then the Irish swept down irresistibly and beat them to their very trenches. It was after 7 o'clock in the evening, and a great cloud of battle smoke trailed from the city to the top of Keeper Mountain some 8 miles away. The assault had cost King William some 4,500 men killed. The loss of the defenders was, of course, much less severe, yet it had been heavy, and, among the dead and dying on the streets and in the breach, lay not a few of the humble heroines of the city. They had baffled a king. For William, on the 30th of August, after blowing up some of his stores and firing his camp, marched his army into winter quarters, and withdrew himself to England.